Hi, and welcome to On and Off, our podcast covering the on-premise and off-premise beverage alcohol industry. I'm Kyle Swartz, editor of Beverage Dynamics magazine. In this episode, we're joined by Quinton Jay, founder and owner of Bacchus Wine Spirits, a top 100 retailer based in Millbrae, California. Bacchus is a leader in the beverage alcohol retail industry in terms of using data and analytics to shape successful business strategies. Thank you for joining us today, Quinton.
Hey, Kyle, thanks a lot for the time. Love talking about this topic. I love talking about data.
Absolutely. And before we get into data and strategies, can you tell us a little bit about your background in the beverage industry and also about how your store is set up within a butcher?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I started many moons ago at as a former banker. So I'm a recovering banker. Got into the beverage business post business school and worked for the Coca-Cola company. So where I learned a lot about gathering facts, analytics, and just kind of about the business in general, just beverages. And then got jumped into the wine industry in the early 2000s, running a winery called Bonnie Doon Vineyards as the general manager there. Ran wineries for the next 10, 15 years. And then I worked for a private equity firm that was started by Sam Brothman, whose family used to own Seagram's.
Yep.
Did that for several years and then ultimately opened Bacchus Wine and Spirits, which is located inside of a butcher shop that's been around since 1958, largest dried aged beef room in the Bay Area. The butchers will sell 10,000 pounds of prime rib from November 1st to the end of the year.
Wow.
Just to kind of give you a context, that loin where you get the New York, the ribeye is only probably about 7% of the cow. So it's a lot of cows that have to help our holiday table. And so 3 generations of butchers are still there. We celebrated our 10th year this year, and it's been a fun ride. Watching the trends and everything from sort of originally opening as a wine shop, then adding in spirits, RTDs, everything. So it's been a good fun ride.
That's fantastic. And you gave a tremendous presentation at our 2025 Beverage Alcohol Retailers Conference on the topic of data and information. I wanted to follow up on that presentation, talk more about it here. To begin with, broadly, why is using data and analytics so important nowadays in our industry?
Well, I think one of the things is that there's a lot of noise, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of opinions, be it influencers to, there's a lot of noise out there. But the one thing that I think that what data allows you to do is allows you to gather the facts and then start looking at, as they say, numbers don't lie, but numbers can be manipulated. I get it, right? Because you can make it do what you want. But if you look at raw numbers in its raw form and use ratios and, it's kind of like, maybe just something really basic, even as year on year, or wow, this category is higher than the prior year. So I think it's just kind of looking at information and kind of helping you sort of, because we all have a personal bias. Right. But what the data does is allows you to sort of bring that personal bias back to the center and actually let you look at some of the information in its raw and pure form.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we use data and analytics here at the magazines to see which articles are actually doing well versus what aren't. And it's always surprising which ones do extremely well. I always think the great example is the distilled Doritos Spirit. Do you remember that from last year or the year before?
Yes, I do. Oh, my God. That was amazing.
I put that article up and it was our most viewed article of the year. The type of thing you're like, all right, I don't know anyone. And we did get sent a sample. It tasted shockingly good. And we put it up and it did great. And there you go. You'd be surprised. What are some of the data tools that you use?
We're mainly using three. Our POS is Lightspeed. And then our e-com, we're using City Hive.
Yep.
So those are sort of two of the data sources. I'm an I'm an Excel junkie, so I just export the data and kind of convert it to the way that I want to. I mean, I'm so old. I started with Lotus 123, so that kind of tells you how old I am. So, looking at sort of information, so I use mostly Excel. I have my own sort of reports that I like, and we just take the information and, kind of knowing Excel really well. We do some pivot tables, but, I tell people that you don't need those fancy tools like pivot tables because they're kind of a pain to sort of learn and create, but, just kind of something basic. Hey, am I up or am I down? Yeah. Where do I see, what categories are up or down? Is there a subcategory within that, right? Is there a price range that is your sweet spot? So it's kind of looking at information that, that way, and then kind of coming up with your own opinions. And, every shop is a little different. Yep. There are macro trends, but, I think that if you lay sort of your piece, your data, plus with the macro trends, you're able to kind of adjust and triangulate the pieces.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes right into our next question here. Some of the data and strategy you're using, to deal with the whiskey downturn, sort of the correction in the
Mm.
whiskey industry right now that we're seeing. One of the things I saw on your presentation that I loved is you wrote 40 is the new 50. Can you expand upon that? $40 is
Yeah.
the new $50.
Yes. I wish that was age because I'm in my 50s. So, to a more serious note, I think I think when bourbon was coming up really hot, one of the things that we were seeing is that people weren't really, I would say, really kind of new. They were still exploring, and people use price as an indicator of quality, right or wrong, but it's kind of a metric that everybody uses. And at that time, as I jokingly would tell people, and I was seeing this as a trend, that it was easier to sell a bottle of bourbon above $50 than it was below $50.
Yeah.
And the inverse was happening with wine. It was easier to sell, a bottle under 50 and harder to sell it over 50, primarily because, there's more, pours out of a spirit, 750, etc. But now I think as two things have happened, one is, I think the economy and, people are a little bit more careful with their dollars. And then I think the second is that, people have tried a lot of bourbons, right? They're getting smarter. They're starting to have their own taste. And, when people start having their opinion about things, then people start looking for a little bit of value. And I think that that's kind of why we've seen a slight reset, in that category. And then just kind of the whole bourbon fever, if you want to call it, just kind of died down a little bit. So, which I think is good. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. As a retailer, I love making more money, right? I love the higher ring ups, but I also do like it that people are starting to kind of have their own sort of taste profiles and sort of know what they need. And, if they're making a cocktail, they're not putting in $100 bottle
Yeah.
of bourbon into a cocktail, right? You don't need that, right? And Rittenhouse Rye is a great, mid-20s, 100 proof bottle and bond rye for your whatever drink that you're making. So I think that those are things that are happening there.
Yeah, great. And speaking about some of those rare bottles, you also said in your presentation that they're either gathering dust or selling out too quickly.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I think with collectors and the kind of the way that they interact with any beverage, be it tequila, wine, or bourbon, I think it has its own sort of place. Collector stuff is always unusual because it's allocated, and then there's sort of things that need to happen in order to get that allocation, right? You need to be a certain type of retailer and volume, whatever you want to call it. Those are just details. But I think that the consumer's like, wow, is the Pappy really worth that much, right? And I think it's kind of gotten into enough people have tasted it, so kind of the fever is down. And I'm not picking on Pappy, but Pappy's still Pappy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. The people that want it, right? And then there's other sort of allocated bottles that might have been, I won't say artificially allocated, but just not really allocated, but kind of made to look allocated, maybe not even tasted allocated, but just kind of had a really good story behind it to make it allocated. Those I think are having a little bit more of a tougher time, right? And I think the sheen is starting to come off a little bit. So again, maturing audience of drinkers. You know what I mean? The ones that were just kind of the collector bros or collector sisters or whatever you want to call those people, they're kind of gone to the wayside. I've even heard from a friend of mine who knows a bunch of people who flip products. They're holding on to stuff, right? Not because they want to, it's because no one's willing to kind of flip those bottles like they were flipping houses for a while.
Yeah, the secondary market's way down. I also have friends like that, and I know exactly what you mean. They say that to me all the time now. The secondary is crashing. And speaking of which, one of the things that's probably helping that go down is you created an "if you like it" section in your store for people who are perhaps looking for Eagle Rare or Blanton's alternatives to some of those allocated products. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as a retailer, one of the things that you do is you build trust, right? You build trust with your, with your consumer base. As I kind of tell people all the time, why I'm kind of paranoid in the business is you're only as good as the last bottle you sold your customer, right? If you sell them a crappy bottle, you break that trust, or you kind of have to at least have a reason why they might not have liked it. And sometimes with wine, I tell people, I go, you know what, the wine wasn't flawed. Just not the wine that you like.
Yeah.
You don't have to like all wines, just like you don't need to like all bourbons, right? So it's kind of finding, so if it's the if you like sort of section that we have, at the end of the day, it's an important piece that has, it has an important piece there that is a taste profile. Those type of bourbons are have a certain type of mash bill. They have a certain wheat profile to them, right? So if that's the case, then you need to find other wheated bourbons that sort of fit that bill, right? So not that we're promoting sort of particular products, but the Willet 8-year
Yeah.
wheated is one of my favorites, right?
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, I go, if you like these types and I don't have it, you should try this one.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we do, and I've had a bunch of happy customers also.
Yeah, and whenever people talk about some of these rare weeded bourbons that they like and can't find, I'm always like, "Are you drinking Larceny? Just
Exactly.
go drink some Larceny. It's a weeder. It's
Yeah.
delicious. It's made by Heaven Hill. It's gonna be perfect.
Nope.
Go drink it."
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So it's finding these that are like that, right? But that's part of maybe a secondary exploration that people aren't willing to invest time into, but that's why you have retailers to help you with that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. This episode is brought to you by Discartes, the last mile delivery platform purpose built for beverage distribution. Discartes unifies route planning, mobile dispatch, real time tracking, and delivery analytics to help you deliver on time and in full, all while reducing costs and complexity. Increase cases per hour, cut stop time, and eliminate "where's my order" calls with end to end visibility and smarter workflows. Leading distributors like Heartland Coca-Cola, Mitchell Distributing, Pepin Distributing, Arctic Glacier, ShorePoint, and Silver Eagle distributors trust Discartes to power their delivery operations. It's time to optimize routes while improving service levels, so visit Discartes.com to learn more. You're also using data and strategy to deal with the tequila SKU oversaturation that all the stores have seen. The tequila section has exploded. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, tequila's a super hot category right now. It's a super hot category for multiple reasons. I mean, I think that as a friend of mine that I was talking with about the nightclub, he's in the nightclub industry. And, I go, do you think it's going to drop off like bourbon and and everything else? He just goes, no, I don't think so. He goes, because right now at clubs, right, tequila is starting to push out champagne, bubbles, and starting to push out tequila because you can mix it. And he goes, Quinton, you can't mix bourbon the same way. I said, oh, wow. Then you have the better for you category, low cal for, for the soccer moms. So you're having three sort of revenue drivers sort of kind of pushing this category forward. With that sort of happening though, right, has been a sort of an oversaturation. You have the celebrity tequilas and everything else. And, it is what it is. Not all of them are bad, right? You know what I mean? So, but I think, there's starting to be definitely an oversaturation. And so what we've done as a smaller store is actually, and something that I actually drink on a personal level, are additive free tequilas, right? And sort of for the audience that might be listening, the four main additives, because they always ask, are caramel coloring, oak extract, glycerin for mouthfeel, and of course, artificial sweeteners, right? So, so those things I think, your body has a hard time processing. So I think that's why additive-free tequilas have actually taken a kind of a life of its own. And knowing that actually the price points are actually a little bit, we can charge probably $5 to $10 higher, knowing that it's additive free.
Absolutely. Additive free, obviously very hot right now. We're seeing that everywhere. You launched tequilaaf.com. I love that phrase. Can you tell us a little bit about launching that site?
Yeah, I mean, I on a personal level, I drink additive-free tequilas, right? And and I was using the acronym AF after all of it within our PO system, and I just go, I wonder if that URL is available, right? And next thing you know, it was available and it was additive-free. And then I was talking with someone younger, probably about 20 years, probably a little more. And he was just losing his mind. He was just like, oh my God, that's such a cool name. I love this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, additive free is really important in your life. And, and kind of being good to your body. And I was just like, man, this guy like a weirdo, health nut, granola dude, whatever. And then next thing you know, he kind of told me what the other AF means.
I'm going to be honest with you,
like
Quinton. It wasn't until you just explained it that I always assumed that AF was not for additive free. Being a millennial, when I see AF, I thought the same acronym that other gentleman did. That's so funny. Well, it's even better though, because now I didn't even realize it had like a legitimate tie-in too. I thought you were just being silly and clever.
No. I like being silly and clever, but apparently I'm old now. So no, I have jumped the chasm to being an old dude now.
Well, you did well for
Brutal.
that. Let me tell you, that's a hilarious name. So I'm sorry. Please keep going.
Yeah, so but I think it's kind of a double entendre of like being it now. I kind of look at it kind of differently now, right? I look at it as a double entendre into
Yeah.
being able to court younger consumers, right, that are interested in sort of better for you. They're just better consumers. They don't drink junk. And I think that, there's a whole push now, or at least a narrative that's being pushed about young people don't drink. I'm not in that camp. I just think they just drink less and they just drink better,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
there's a difference, right? They're not binge drinking for guys of my generation, right? So there's a bunch of things that are happening. I think that and then if we can kind of do a double entendre and kind of bring younger consumers in, and then the old guys like me that want to live a little bit longer and but still drink, voila.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's kind of a fun
absolutely.
thing.
I'm seeing that as well. I've seen some other stores that have focused in on the healthier. I always forget the name of the store in Jersey, and I feel embarrassed about this. Maybe I'll edit myself in getting the name correctly. But they
Yeah.
sell a lot of organic wine to younger consumers, and
Hmm.
they're like one of the rare stores I talk to where they're like, "Yeah, our wine sales are up with younger consumers because we just focus on organic, biodynamic wines." And I think you're right.
Hmm.
This is the big debate this year: is are younger consumers drinking at all? This is all I write about
Hmm.
anymore. This is all I feel like we talk about anymore. Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
with you. I'm of the opinion that they do drink. They just drink less but better. And they may end up drinking more. I mean, as they age up, get more money, et cetera, et cetera. I was
Yeah.
just wondering, and this wasn't on my list of questions, but what is your data showing about younger consumers?
I mean, they're still buying. They definitely buy less. They buy better quality.
Mm,
They're more informed, right? They can just pull up this thing called, an iPhone or whatever, their phone, and just look up any information that they're looking for. They're very smart about sort of fake brands, right? You know what I mean?
yeah,
That aren't real. They like authentic. They like supporting, they like hearing the story. And this is kind of what small retailers do. I mean, rarely do I have someone that walks in the shop and kind of goes, how many points was that? Is that a 100 pointer? Yeah,
yeah,
sure, I get those, right? You know what I mean? But they want to hear the story, right? And why
yeah,
is this bottle on the shelf? So as a retailer, you have to balance the ones that actually are pull brands, right? But then also you need to have kind of what makes us unique.
yeah.
Just to kind of have a little tie in with kind of what you're saying about younger people drinking. I got quoted one time as saying, hey, younger people don't have a drinking problem. They have a marketing problem,
Mm,
right? And we're not marketing them correctly, right?
mm.
So, so from that aspect, I think it's like, maybe it's a bunch of old guys like me that are marketing to them and they're like, I'm not buying that, right? So I think it's kind of how do we, kind of bridge that gap. And I think that that's just pieces there. So,
Yeah, and
anyways.
great example, tequila AF. That definitely appeals to younger consumers. That kind of irreverent humor that you unintentionally put in there, but that really works. I,
It does happen.
That's so funny. And that's like the only conversation I have with wine people anymore is me constantly telling wine people they're marketing to younger people incorrectly. I must have this conversation once a week with a wine person. I just feel like wine has completely missed the boat with younger consumers. The younger consumers are
Hmm.
so undereducated about wine and don't really want, I don't know if they don't want to learn or they feel overwhelmed. I don't know. But anyways, I'm using this as a bridge into my next question, which is
Hmm.
you're doing some successful store events to sell more, especially with wine. It seems like store events really are the key this year. Can you tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more about that?
Yeah. I mean, being inside of a butcher shop, I mean, we naturally have people coming in, right? And, you don't need to go to, I mean, listen, the big box retailers have figured it out, right? Walmart has a greeter in the front, right? To
Yeah.
say hello to you, right? Because people want the human interaction and not just be completely ignored, right? Apple does it too, right? And then, you look at the Costco's of the world, right? There's a reason why people sampling, right? People taste, people buy at the end of the day, right? You're de-risking that purchase, right?
Mm.
And I think that's really big for people, right? At the end of the day. And again, no one really kind of goes, I tell people all the time, I go, I don't care what you buy at the store. You just have to like it. I don't
Yeah.
have to like it, right? You know what I mean? And there's some stuff I carry at the store that I won't say that I don't like, but it may not be something that I would spend my money on,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean? But they're great products. There's nothing wrong with them, right? It's just not my taste profile of sort of where I am, right, as a consumer. So I think it's a little bit of that sort of de-risking, number one. And then number two, like I said, people taste, people buy. I mean, it's a really simple strategy. And I'm a firm believer that as an independent retailer, and and it is legal for you to taste your customers on it, you are missing a huge opportunity, right? Of sort of connecting with the customer, connecting with your suppliers, right? And kind of bridging that gap. And that's sort of what I believe sort of the role of the retailer is now more than anything else, right? Is being maybe a place of community, being social, all these other things, and especially in this electronic age that we're living in, that it's so easy not to, right? But beverage is one of the common things that we share. Food is something common that we all share together. So I think it's kind of how we do that. So I think more of that is good. I think that I would tell all my retailer friends, I go, hey, if you're not doing it, shame on you, right? And we do dinners. And kind of going back to what you were talking about with younger consumers, I think that where we've missed the boat, and I'm a longtime wine guy, running wineries for, 20, 10, 15 plus years in Napa and Sonoma, is that I feel that they feel that they're being lectured to.
Yes.
Right. And that is a problem. Right. And we've set it up that way in a way, right? Primarily because there's these experts, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The only expert is yourself. You like it? Well, you pay X amount of dollars for it. That's the expert that I want to listen to. So anyway, but I think that that's been sort of glorified in its weird way, but it's manifests itself in a different way, which is like, you're telling me and this generation does not want to be told what is that? No way. So I think having more of those demos, more informal, easier, where they're just absorbing information, not being talked to, and then they got to go, right? It doesn't need to be so formal. That's about, we've started making things a lot cheaper, a lot more informal. You taste, you buy. We're open between this time and this time. And then we just kind of have like these socials that we do, which is great.
Yeah, I'm an enormous supporter of store events, store tastings. I've been on top of them for many, many years. I think they're one of the key things this year, especially as the industry goes through a little bit of a pullback. That's a way to maintain excitement. I also think they're a good source of social media because you get to promote them on social media. And then during the store itself, during the event in the store itself, then you get to film people drinking and you get to film the experience. And then the people there post it on social media themselves. It's a social media bonanza. It's just a win-win-win. Like you said, if a store isn't doing events, they're really missing out. And I tell all my retailer friends to be doing events, and it moves product. It moves product. I like seeing
it does.
I've seen some savvy stores here in Connecticut where they built an enormous tasting room upstairs, and they're using it to move single barrel whiskeys that aren't moving otherwise. Because it's like, I'm not going to start naming brands because I certainly don't want to shame, but certainly some brands where you see the bottles sitting, but they're very good brands and they're very good bottles. Yeah. So it's like, we're going to do a tasting around X distillery. Come in, taste it, and then they sell a whole bunch of bottles that have been sitting there collecting dust for a year. It's great. So it's good. Those bottles should be bought. They're good bottles.
Yeah. I mean, we recently just had a tequila. It was a Blanco. It was $85. It's pricey for a Blanco.
Yeah.
And prior to the person coming in, we sold 0 bottles. And finally I was like, listen, I brought this in. You promised me that you were going to do a tasting. The guy ended up selling 13 bottles in 3 hours.
Yeah.
$85 tequila. I mean, it's delicious. Once you put the liquid to lips on it, you're like, wow, that's really nice. But I don't know if without that you would actually start getting that. Now, will there be additional pull out of the store? Yeah, I think so, right? I think that people have tasted it and they're like, you know what, I didn't buy it that day, I'll buy it now. Or someone goes, you know what, I tasted this one, it was really good, man. And then someone just, and when you really think about it, if there's 25 pours out of a bottle, $30 means you're only paying $1 more.
Yeah,
$1 more per taste, right? You're like, I pay $1 for something I really like, no problem at all. Yeah. So I think going back to this whole thing about tasting and, if it's legal in your state, then you got to do it. So anyways.
100%. I always like the states where you're allowed to have a bar in your store too. I think that's really great. That's great because they can do tastings every single day of whatever. One of these quotes you had in your presentation that I love that said, stay on top of trends, but let data shape your story. How are you staying on top of trends? You can tell me a little bit about the difference between trends and data.
I think, trends are things that you sort of hear from people, right? Hey, the big thing for a while was chartreuse, right? You know what I mean? And it seemed like everyone was asking for it. Like, you got chartreuse, you got the yellow, you got the green, you got the yellow, you got the green. And, or even other, categories that I've seen, right? So you're kind of using trends to kind of watch how things start bubbling. And then there comes this sort of tipping point, right? Where all of a sudden it becomes something that's real, right? And that you're starting to push. And, I think it's also a little bit of how maybe the industry pushes products, right? I'm not saying, people have been pushing cognac for a long time, right? And on a personal level, I love drinking cognac. I'm a great base guy, right? You know what I mean? Because I love drinking wine. But it hasn't gotten the sort of the groundswell that tequila had. You know what I mean? And then we can all talk about how that happened, and that's a whole sort of another podcast. But I think that it was sort of looking at trends and saying, wow, a lot of people are asking for these things. Whoa. Oh, and then all of a sudden but I believe there's life cycles to trends. So
Yes.
you kind of have to watch those life cycles to trends to making sure that you're giving the right products to your customer during that time. The data piece comes in to kind of back up to say, wow, we really have been selling a lot more of these. Oh, wow. Hey, we can pour a little bit more. Yeah, we can charge a little bit more for additive free, right? I've seen the poll, right? You know what I mean? Like for us, we have a little sticker on every bottle that's an additive free tequila, right? It says confirm additive free. There are different ways of confirming it, right? We can, talk about that later on another show. But, there are, sort of three categories. It's the original sort of like tequila matchmaker. Then there's our sort of where the distillery says, hey, listen, this is additive free. And, so there's different ways of sort of doing it, but that's where, again, retailer doing the research, doing a little bit of the work, and then finding that piece. But then kind of going back to what you were saying, what you were asking about, trends sort of kind of give me the tickle, but the data allows me to get the confidence to put money behind it.
Well said. And that goes right into the next quote here from you that I really like. Small data used consistently beats big data ignored.
Well, I mean, I think that all of us on a local level have our own data, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we're told about trends. I mean, I'm still waiting for cognac to be the biggest thing, right? Or rum, right? I mean, and
Poor rum.
pour rum, right? I mean, and I love drinking rum drinks. I mean, when I go to Hawaii, the first thing I have is a Mai Tai. Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's sort of like different beverages have different sort of usages for me. Right. So I'm kind of, omni on all that stuff, right? So I'll drink anything. But, so from that aspect, I think that there's that every store needs to sort of understand their store, which is the small data, right? But then also sort of looking at not just kind of jumping on trends that might be like, oh my God, I got to get every chartreuse, every weird chartreuse. And, that could potentially sink your store because now you have, 25 chartreuses and the only one that people want is the one that people know.
How would you recommend someone start when getting into bigger use of trends and insights and data? I know it can seem a little overwhelming at first.
Yeah. I think that, for trends, I think it's sort of kind of writing yourself notes, to be honest. Like, hey, we sold, I've been hearing this a lot, right? At the end of the day, for a retailer, we kind of get a chance to sort of roll the tape back of what that day was about, right? And some days are better than others, of course, from sales aspect. But, it's sort of those data points that when you're talking to your customer, they kind of go, hey, I'm interested in this, right? And you might have read it somewhere, right? I think one of the big trends that you might have seen is Savi B, right? Huge, right? TikTok phenomenon and blah, 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 and all those other pieces, right? So, but that's not just a trend. It's also, you've seen it in sales, right? People selling more, Sauvignon Blancs from, New World places like New Zealand and et cetera. And, NorCal, California Sauvignon Blancs. And then, of course, Sancerre, right? You know what I mean? If you're willing to step up a couple price points, you're in Sancerre world. And, we really can't keep Sancerre even with the tariffs on the shelf, right? People are drinking it, right? People want it. So I think that's kind of looking at that piece, and then kind of doing your own introspect and kind of like, okay, I think this could work in my shop. These are my type of buyers. On the data side, I always tell people, I go small bites, right? Just start simple, because the problem is that it kind of reminds me of sort of working out in a way, right? If you kind of go too crazy, I got to go to the gym every day and, I got to be pumped, you're just going to not do it because, it's not sort of, I won't say not natural, but it's just sort of something that you're learning as a skill set. So you're better off just kind of going, how'd I do yesterday to today? Yeah. What trends do I see in my shop as sales kind of come in? Oh, wow, we're usually really busy between this time and this time. And these are things that you can use to do staffing and everything else, right? At your shop, just kind of making sure that you're doing the right thing for your business. So start simple. Year on year, it doesn't need to be that crazy. Start looking at categories, right? So sort of big macro-y sort of stuff within your small store, right? Which is actually small data. And then just going to go, okay, I see this kind of moving, and just going to go, I know my customers are usually, on the weekends, the average ring up is, $50 plus. but Mondays it's usually about in the 20s, right?
Mm.
Because people are eating, aren't eating filet mignon and, prime rib on, on the weekends. And then during the weekday, they're having, nice meatloaf, right? But also nice meatloaf should have a nice bottle of wine with it too. So.
Absolutely. We'll close with this question. You and I were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, but any thoughts on AI's impact in the industry?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, with Tequila AF, we started using it primarily because I really wanted to kind of see what it could do. And in the last 6 months, I've just seen a huge change. Like, for example, the biggest change is it couldn't do graphics, it couldn't do flyers, it couldn't do pictures other than maybe through an integration through like Canva, but it can actually do it itself now. We're actually even looking at, avatars, right? You know what I mean? Of how all those pieces are. And one of the things that blew my mind, and again, you need to really think about sort of where your mindset is and sort of how you engage with customers. But kind of going through some of this data and looking at it, there are many Instagram personalities with over 1 million viewers that are not even real.
Yeah.
They're fake. They're like generated. I don't even want to call them people. Generated celebrities. Let's just going to put it that way.
Listen, I may or may not follow one that's just a Yeti getting drunk, making silly jokes. I'm sure you probably know what I'm talking about, and probably a lot of people listening to this do, because he has like you said, I think he has millions of followers. Who's ever making that hilarious profile? Oh, I follow another one that's a fake truck stop, and it's all just like really crude truck stop humor, and everything in it is AI generated, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, right. But if prior to learning about that, I would never follow anybody like that. Now I do. Now I kind of get why people follow it, because I've watched it a couple times. I'm like, oh my God, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So I think, it's changing, right? And, its impact is going to be even more of the democratization of sort of getting your story out there, right? And if you catch lightning, then all of a sudden it goes crazy and wild. So I think it's sort of, how do you sort of kind of get behind it? And some of the old rules don't matter or are there anymore. And it's a new Wild West frontier. And I think AI is going to help push that even further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always a fan of the phrase, you won't be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by somebody using AI.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Learn it now. Learn it now. It's only going to get better. And like you said, like the dramatic improvement in the last 6 months alone, you're right. It's night and day. It's almost like on a month-to-month basis, it improves leaps and bounds. The improvement in it is growing exponentially. So hop on now, educate yourself now. Even the smallest amount you can do is a good way to get in. And also, as I was saying before we started recording to Quinton, chances are you're already using AI and you don't even know it. Because
correct,
AI has woven itself into everything, or people have woven it into everything already. A great example, Canva Pro, definitely using AI, the way it generates flyers, etc. And it's everywhere now. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you again to Quinton for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's always good chatting with you and kind of doing this over a podcast. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thanks to everyone who tuned in for this episode of On and Off. We appreciate all of our listeners, and we appreciate this episode's sponsor, Discardes. Please do join us next time when we'll talk about yet another fascinating topic that spans the retail and restaurant worlds. Until then, cheers. If you enjoyed the On and Off podcast, please hit the subscribe button. Also, you can find more great content at cheersonline.com and beveragedynamics.com, including recipes, product reviews, and interviews with the movers and shakers of the beverage alcohol industry. You can also sign up for our free weekly e-newsletters for both publications on our websites. Cheers.